Everybody, this is Chris, and I'm going to give you a couple tips on putting HID headlights in your Trans Am. If you're going to do it yourself, you're going to need a couple tools, and with my experience over the last couple days, I'm going to give you some good tips so you can get this project done right and easily.
Here's the kit I bought. Innovated 35 watt with 9005 style bulbs. 5000K because I wanted daylight white and not blue. This kit has the slim inverter style. You can see the 9005 bulb is not standard. It has a straight end off the back of it, not the normal 90-degree turn. Here's the frame that is underneath the body colored skin of the headlight. It is cast aluminum and it doesn't bend easily. Mine was dented from the first owner and I tried to bend it back, but then it completely cracked. It has 6 adjustable screws to hold it in the exact position you need to make the headlight look flush when closed. It's not as difficult as it seems to get it adjusted right, but it does take a couple tries. Here is the headlight assembly without the skin or the upper frame.
First of all, you might want to use one of these. Just a little hand drill or impact drill. Get a tiny little Torx bit and put it on an extender there so you can take the headlight adjusters, those little screws on and off, a couple times really easily. Also suggest something like this. Put a flexible head and a in your Allen size on an extension here. You can plug that into your drill and put your headlamps up real quick and easy, up or down. So I have this mostly taken apart here. You take your old headlight bucket out. There we go, there's the back of the housing. I don't know, mine must have got all burned up there, short circuit or something going on with some ugly grease. But in here is your frame, and you can see where your bucket actually rests on these 3 kind of protrusions that are inside the bucket right there. You've got your retainer spring on the back there, and you're going to want to have one of these little pullers, hook pullers, to pull this spring on and off when you're putting your headlight on and off. When you're finished there, you can see how tightly sprung your high beam side is there. You're going to want to have something like this to help pull that out, but hey, be careful. Don't hook yourself on your thumb or anything with that. It's going to hurt. So here's another dumb but kind of obvious tip that you ought to do. Put some blue tape or masking tape on the front edge of your hood and on your headlight cover here. Got your driver's side headlamp there, and the skin is obviously taken off of it. There's your frame. It's going to make it a lot easier if you just take the whole frame off the top so you can get to all your adjusters. You can run your wires and stuff through. You'll be able to get your hand down there. You'll be able to get your hand down there so you can cut the original wires, get your soldering iron in there. I did my soldering from the front side. Maybe you want to do it from the back side. Just depends. I needed to take my cover off so I could grind this little piece of metal off here. And let's take a look on the driver's side. That is also gonna have to be taken care of. Right there, that little piece. This isn't looking too good either. I might grind this down a little bit because there's not going to be a lot of space for the wire loom to come through here either. It's got to come right through that space between this adjuster and this screw bracket here. So I'm going to want some more space here, and I don't see any problem with carving that down just a little bit. Just put a 1/2 inch wide notch in there and knock that down a little bit more. It's not going to impact the integrity of that thing at all. So here's a better close-up of the light that I have attached. So I have my nice adjustment plate and bracket there. Make sure you mount those with the text reading rightward, right side up. And so my 4 screws here, you can see there's my 1-inch screw with my nut, and a little acorn nut, and then 4 of them there, so it sits nice and flush. inside the bucket then when you're done with that. So I use stainless steel just because I didn't want to have any rust going down in the future. Only costs a little bit more for those screws at the hardware store. So all said, hardware store hardware was like 10 bucks or less. Here's just another outside view of this bracket that I made to keep the inverters and the line conditioner or capacitor, whatever that is, in there. So this is for the driver's side. Just got some pop rivets for that little box. Got some screws there. Hold the inverter on there. Always use that wire loom, man. That stuff is super cheap. Makes it look kind of nice. Keeps your wires from rubbing on anything. And it's pretty simple to just make this kind of template from a piece of cereal box cardboard. Just pop some holes in it. Just use some tin snips. Just use a nice Scotch-Brite pad on it to clean up all your scuff marks and everything. Make it look just a little professional. Even though you won't see it much, still want things to look nice in there.
Here's the inverter bracket mounted under the passenger headlight. On the left you can see 2 nuts on 2 studs. Those studs are on the front cross member and hold a bracket for the front bumper cover. You can fit 2 more nuts over those studs. On the right you can see a bolt beside the inverter. I drilled a hole in the front cross member and used a clip-on nut to secure it. The shape of this inverter bracket has to look like this, with a deep cutout, so when the headlight goes down, there is room for the headlight bumper to contact the front cross member.
Okay, quick backgrounds here. If you've never taken your headlights apart, there is a metal frame that actually holds the bulb housings in. Here's the high beam. Here's the bucket for it. And then there's a little frame that actually holds the bulb in. The back of this bucket has a hole where the plug goes and some little prongs. Some other guys, when they first got these HID kits, just took these buckets and just cut them out and put the back through. And that kind of worked, but that wasn't the best. I've got my HID mounted over here on one of these custom-made, custom-shaped plates that has the tangs for the adjusters on them. And you see how this halogen bulb housing sticks out the back here. I've got the cables going around the back because I'm very concerned about touching this metal part, and if these wires got pinched and were pushed back down this way, you know, then they would just get flexed over time. So I've got my wires loomed up, taped up here. This little edge of metal right there, I ground that down because that was touching the bottom edge of the HI bulb itself. Underneath the bulbs, underneath the whole headlight unit here, I made a custom bracket to keep the electronics in place instead of just having them flop around or only one piece secured down. So I'm going to use my power drill here and raise up the headlight unit quick so you can take a look at that. So now you can see here's my HID bulb in the frame, the adjusters, spring down here on this corner. Now what I did was I used exactly 1 inch long screws, fed them through the front of the frame, through the HID housing. I used 1 screw to tighten it down, and then I used these kind of acorn nuts on the top. So there are 4 places where the 4 screws touch the back of this bracket and kind of are how the bucket sits, how the light sits in the bucket properly. So when you adjust it, it can rotate around, and this has to be the fulcrum of where the adjustments actually do the adjusting from. So you can adjust it, you know, up and down, and then left and right, and the spring in the corner over there keeps it in place. But you needed something for the light itself to kind of sit on. And if you didn't do this, if you just put this straight in, there's some little indents inside the housing here itself where the other lighting bucket touched. There was like some heavy-duty grease on there to keep it from squeaking and stuff. So your housing of the actual halo light could touch there, but it's all pushed back a little bit farther, and I wanted to have this whole housing moved forward so that these wires weren't touching so much. All right, so we go down here under the light. I've got my HID inverter unit there, and then this is some kind of, I don't know, not even sure what that is, if that's some kind of capacitor or just line conditioner. But I built this kind of funny L-shaped piece of metal. Used the 2 screws that were on the bulkhead over here, and the screws were long enough that I could put some more nuts on the outside of them. Drilled 1 extra hole over here on the main bulkhead, and then just used a clip nut on the back of that to screw into, and then obviously just screwed that on. I made this little box that holds this line conditioner capacitor thing, and I just pop riveted that onto my sheet metal there, so all that's real secure, and that's not wiggling around or anything at all. It's staying nice and tight there. So here's my connector for my original headlight. See, I double insulated it there. Each line was soldered, and then had a piece of insulation, shrink tubing insulation around it, and then both of them together have shrink tubing insulation over it, and that can kind of hang around there. That's no big deal. So there's how it looks. It sits in there. This is nice and firm. Those 4 acorn nuts that I used, the adjusters are just right, and it's not moving around at all. There's no wiggle. There's no squeak or anything on there. And just to kind of finish up showing you what's underneath here, there is this frame piece that you'll see that is what actually holds your headlight cover that's painted your body color on top of there, and there's some adjuster screws to keep that in the right position, and then you've got your little Torx screws here. There's 3 of them on the top to adjust this, and honestly it was pretty easy to get those things lined up. I had taken these off to kind of do some test fitting, and it was actually super easy to line up the whole headlight unit and the headlight cover and make it look like it just came from the factory. All the panel gaps around were really easy to do. So don't be afraid of taking those off and giving yourself some room to work there if you need to. It'll only take you 10 minutes to line up the headlight covers when you're done with it. Hey, here's a pro tip. Cable management is really important, especially when you don't have a lot of extra space and these things are kind of tight here. There's an easy place to put a zip tie here though. It's just loose enough that the cable will mostly stay in place. It's not going to go over top of this edge as it moves around. It's just going to get pulled up a little bit. Same thing down here. Put a zip tie around my cables coming out of my capacitor conditioner or whatever, because I needed those to stay over to the side so they don't get pinched when this whole headlight assembly goes down. It goes to rest on those little feet down there. It goes down, and you don't want that to be sitting on top of a wire, because then your headlight's going to be sitting up at a weird angle. Okay, I've got a white sheet on that piece of board there, and on the passenger side is just going to be my white wall. It's just in my garage, just 3.5 feet away from the wall. So that's all I'm really going to be able to do here. Can't take the car outside yet to show you how it looks. Alright, so right now the halogen bulb looks a little yellower and brighter, and the HID bulb is definitely a lot bluer, but it's still warming up a little bit. It's got a little bit of flicker over there. Is it getting brighter? Is it getting brighter? It is slowly getting brighter. It is definitely now much whiter than the halogen bulb. The halogen bulb is still very yellow, and the HID bulb is very white, very clear and bright white now. And I would say it's probably at this point kind of hard to see just because of the exposure here. The HID bulb is finally getting a little bit brighter than the halogen bulb is. Halogen bulb is definitely looking a little dim. HID bulb is looking really nice and sharp. Let's see if I can do a different video with a different exposure here. Okay, doing this video here with my manual exposure app, and I'm going to be able to dim it down here a little bit. Now you can kind of see the difference between the HID bulb and the halogen bulb, HID bulb, now that it's totally warmed up, is a lot brighter than the halogen bulb, although we're going to have to see how it really is out in the real world then.
So the first time I washed my car, I got water in one of the headlights. I'm not sure where it came in. Clearly these halo bulbs were not designed to be lowered at an angle. In order to seal them up, I put a line of sealant around the back edge of the front lip of the housing that holds the glass dome in. Also, the bulbs themselves are not the best quality. It appears there could be some very small gaps around where the wires enter the bulb, so I put a glob of sealant around those as well. I also put a line of sealant around the edge where the front and the back of the Hella housing meet, although that seemed like it was sealed pretty well. You can never be too sure. One last tip is that I drilled 2 very tiny holes at the edge of the bulb flange so I could use a C-clip pliers to more easily turn the bulbs all the way to their seated position. The bulbs themselves seem like they're a little flimsy, and the protrusions out the back can't take a lot of torque to turn them and get them all the way seated into the housing, so this C-clip pliers helps a lot to get them turned all the way and set in where they need to go.
Okay, so here's the manual headlight razor, and I've loosened the tension. I've rotated this a couple turns to the left, and what you can see is that this motor can move around here. See, I can just push that around because the tabs that hold the motor on top of the gear are now loose, and they've either started not engaging or stripping out the gear, or both. So we're going to have to take out the motor and tap it back down, and then while I'm there, I may as well replace the gear as well. And here is the motor. It's out, and yep, lots of slop on there. All right, here's our motor taken apart. I have already had this on the vise and press these tangs down a little more using my punch here to make sure that this motor was tight.